Now that we have our segments cut, we're ready to start gluing them up. There are a few different ways you can go about gluing up your segments, so let's go over them. The first way is going to be using rubber bands. You can use one rubber band, but I always recommend using as many as you can, really. The more rubber bands you use, the tighter your segments are gonna get. And when you're gluing up your segments, you want your joints to be as tight as possible. So if you're gonna use rubber bands, I recommend using at least 3, depending on the rubber bands you're using and depending on the size of your ring. The second, which I don't really recommend, but it can work, is going to be tape. You can use some blue tape and put all your segments together like this, and then just roll them into a ring and pull that tape as tight as you can, and that will glue up your segments. I don't recommend this way just because it's really hard to get your tape tight and make your segment joints tight. But I feel like if you're really trying to pinch pennies, every woodworker has some blue tape in their shop and it can work. And the third and final way to glue up your segmented rings is my favorite, hose clamps. These things are awesome because they come in all kinds of sizes and you can link them together to make any size ring that you want. Also, you can use a drill and you can really drive this thing home and get super tight joints with it. And if you're asking me, I'm gonna tell you, get hose clamps straight out the gate. Don't bother with rubber bands, don't bother with tape unless you're really trying to pinch pennies. But these things are only like $2 or $3 a piece and they can be reused and they're just phenomenal. And that's what we're gonna be using today to glue up our segmented rings, hose clamps. Because they're the best. They're just the best. All right, let's go over the tools that you are going to need to glue your rings together. You're going to need hose clamps. These are 2 6-inch hose clamps that I have put together to make a 12-inch circle, which is going to fit perfectly around my circle. And you just want these ready to go. You don't want to be finagling with these and getting them together while your glue is setting. So I've got 3 of these ready to go. The other one's already on this one. Glue. Obviously you're going to need glue for a glue up. I'm using Titebond 3. I really like using Titebond 3 for my segmented bowls because it is waterproof. And a lot of my bowls are sold or given away as a snack bowl, a fruit bowl, popcorn bowl, whatever. It's going to have food going in it, and I'm assuming people are going to rinse them out and wash them. Titebond 3 is going to be the glue for that. My drill with a specialized bit on the end to tighten down my hose clamps. All of these have little things you can click into and then tighten it down from there. So I've got that. And last but not least, I have a little 10-ounce hammer. This is just for when I've tightened everything down and the glue is curing, I can just use this to tap all of my joints and get my ring as flat as possible. So really quickly, I want to go over these segments. When you are getting ready to glue up your segments, you want to make sure that your edges are clean and free of debris. There's nothing in there. And that you don't have any weird saw marks going on in there, like it shifted or moved while it was being cut. You want your edges to just be nice, clean, and crisp. If you do have a piece that has some really bad tear out on it, like this, I wouldn't worry about it. That's probably going to end up being sanded off anyways. You just, again, want to make sure that it isn't affecting the main core of your segments. Last little tip before we get started, try and make sure that your gluing surface is nice and flat, or as flat as can be. I'm using a nice melamine top. I guess I can't really say nice because it is pretty messed up, but melamine's pretty good because it's a little harder for glue to stick to. I know there are some wood turners out there who use a granite or a marble slab. Really, whatever works for you will work for you. If you're afraid of ruining your beautiful melamine top like mine, you can always jump on Amazon and order one of these silicone mats. I also know some people use just wax paper or brown paper underneath their glue ups. Last little bit of info, Your fingers are going to get covered in glue. There's going to be no way around it. You can wear gloves, but I really don't think it's going to do much for you. So as you can see, I'm gluing just down the middle, a good dollop of glue there, and I'm just sticking these together. I found that this works just fine for me, and it allows me to do my glue ups quickly, so I'm not worried about my glue setting before I'm done. If you'd like, you can always take your glue bottle and do the whole thing. I just think that that's a little bit of overkill. But whatever works for you, again. Then we could bring these together. Grab our ring. Get it on there. Come on. There we go. And I also like this part right here. This part's going to be the part that's tightening, not to be on the corners here. I don't know why, I just feel like it messes them up. So I always try to make sure it's along one of the edges of the rings here. Then I'm only going to tighten this down just enough to see some glue squeeze out. Like that. And now I can go in with my 10-ounce hammer and kind of just feel around and make sure that everything lines up. I'm just looking for higher segments and lower segments, which everything is feeling pretty good. And what that's going to do is getting all these level is just make your sanding process a heck of a lot easier. And once I've gone around and seen that everything's relatively flat, I can come in and just finish tightening this down. And that is how it's supposed to look. Nice and easy. We got 3 of them done. They should dry up in about 20 minutes, but usually I leave all my segmented rings overnight just to be safe. And of course, I didn't forget about our base, our super base. We're just gonna throw these in the clamps and get that done. Hand push that together. Beautiful. And there we have it. I'm just gonna rub that in there because I can. And now that we've got this in clamps and these in clamps, we just wait. Okay, it's been well over 12 hours, so now we can get all of this stuff sanded nice and flat. There are a few ways that you can go about sanding your rings. Let's talk about them. So the very first thing I'm going to tell you not to do is to use one of these. Do not try and flatten your ring with a hand sander. This is going to be the perfect way to not get flat rings. There's too many chances of you tipping in or tipping out, and it's just not really going to work. You can try. Like I always say, you can try, but I do not recommend it. So the first way I want to show you is by getting a very large piece of sandpaper and a flat surface. I don't actually flatten my rings this way, but this is the largest piece of sandpaper I have and the flattest surface I got. But the gist of it is you want to take a large piece of sandpaper, put it on a flat surface. A lot of people put it on their table saw. The cast iron should be pretty dang flat. And you're just going to take your ring and sand it. One trick that I use when I'm sanding my rings is I change my holding positions. So if I'm holding it here and sanding like this, after about a minute or so, I will turn the ring and change my holding position and then continue sanding. Okay, that's looking really good to me. Here are some ways that you can tell if your ring is good and flat. So one way to see that your ring is good and flat is you can see all the glue marks right here on the ring. When I flip it over, no glue marks. That's a pretty good indicator that your ring is flat. And if this doesn't do it for you, you can always head over here to the table saw and just put it on your cast iron, tap it in all the corners. I got no sort of wiggling or anything, so I know this ring, or this side of this ring, is nice and flat. Then all you have to do is repeat the process. That is definitely not my favorite way to do it. I think I did it that way when I first started and quickly learned that that way's the worst. It takes a long time, your arms get super tired, and it's just not the most efficient way to do it. But it works, so there's that. Let's check out the next way. This is going to be one of your most effective ways to sand rings. This is a super simple jig that I made for my lathe. I highly recommend you make one of these. All it is a circle. This is a 12-inch circle. It's my max capacity of my lathe with sandpaper on the front of it. You can basically get these sanding discs at any size you need, and this jig really only took about 20 minutes to make. This is obviously going to be a lot faster than just using your arms and a flat surface, and this is how it works. You take your ring, you turn on your lathe, and you place your ring on your lathe. The only thing you need to be careful of is remembering that this side is going down and this side is going up. So when you go to put your ring on there, set it on there really nice and light, because you don't want this thing to shoot out of your hand, and watch your fingers. I guess I'll stop talking about it and just show you guys. Oh yeah, and make sure you wear a mask, because this thing spits out so much dust. If you can hook up some dust collection to it, it'll help you in the long run. Got my glue marks on there. So I'm gonna come at it like this. My body is over this way. Nice and easy. Just barely putting it on there. And then as I get comfortable with it, I can apply more pressure. But just like I did with the other one, I'm gonna change my holding style. Still got some glue marks there, so I know this isn't flat yet. There we go. So now I have two flat sides, one from the hand one and one from this one. Obviously you can tell this one's way faster, and it's gonna save your arms in the long run. So real quick, I'm gonna sand all my rings using this, and then we'll talk about the base. Okay, these are done. They look very good. I'll give you guys a close-up right here. But as you can see, as we put them together and kind of shift them around, everything looks pretty good. Now let's talk about your base. If your base will fit on your disc sander, do it that way. That's gonna be the easiest way to get that done. If it won't, you should be able to use a hand sander or an orbital sander to get this nice and flat. I'm not seeing any gaps on the inside, and I'm not seeing any gaps on the outside. So that means that this is flat to this ring, which is perfect. Okay, for your glue up, don't overcomplicate it. That's the first thing I'm gonna say, because it's really easy to overcomplicate it and mess up your bowl blink, essentially. For starters, you are going to want to stagger your seams. So you're gonna want one seam in the middle of one segment and one seam in the middle of the next segment, so on and so forth, sort of like a set of bricks. And then as you add more rings, you're going to stagger those seams. So that way you end up with something looking like that. Why do we do that? These joints are glued up end grain to end grain, which, as we know in woodworking, is the weakest joint you could possibly do. Staggering your seams is essentially adding a bridge between these two joints. If you were to glue these together, seam to seam, It could work. I have tried that before just to test it. The bowl worked out fine. I don't believe there was any cracking or anything like that. I can't even remember what happened to the bowl. But as far as I remember, it worked out fine. So if you want, you could do that. Staggering your seams is definitely going to add a bit of interest to your bowl, and it's just going to give it a good look overall. Overall, it is a structural thing, and it is a good practice to continue to do that. Now, when you go to glue these up, you are going to want to glue all 3 of these rings up at the same time. I would suggest not doing that. The more glue that you add, the more likely things are to be slippery. So when I do a glue up, I glue up usually 2 at a time. And that way I can ensure that I'm giving the rings and the joints and everything the focus that it needs. There are multiple ways you can go about gluing up your rings. I prefer to use these. These are just little spring clamps. You can get them for $1 or $2 at Home Depot or Harbor Freight. I really like using these because I have multiple of them and I can do multiple ring glue ups at once. They apply more than enough pressure, and obviously the more you add, the more pressure they are going to put on your piece. You might have some F-style clamps in your shop. These can be a little finicky because as you go to apply the pressure, your rings might shift. But these also work just fine. And the third way that I've seen people do that I'm not the biggest fan of, but it can work, is using one of these. This is a 50-pound kettlebell. Really, any sort of weight can work. So you can put your base on top and then put your weight on top of that, and that will apply the pressure down and your glue up will work. The reason I don't like using weights is because I'm not sure where all the pressure is going with just this weight. Obviously it's going down, which is good, but if perchance there is a gap over here, I can't really apply the pressure over here without lifting the pressure up over here. It's just something to think about. A weight will work, but it's not my go-to method. So to get started, I'm gonna glue up my top 2 rings. One of these is going to end up being the top of my bowl. So if you have any sort of grain pattern that you'd like to emphasize or some curliness or anything like that, these 2 are going to be your tops. And remember, the more glue the better. Okay, then what I like to do, take my ring and put it on like this. Right, so all the seams match up, apply pressure and wiggle it, and then twist it into place where I want it, and apply more pressure. You should be having a good amount of glue squeeze out just with the pressure that you're applying, and then do your best to find the middle of all of your segments. You can see your segments on the inside and you can see them on the outside. So just take your time here. Try and get this as well balanced as possible. I'm gonna leave this just kind of sitting like this for maybe 2 minutes while this glue sets, and then I'll come in and add my clamps. I can add my clamps now, but I'm gonna have a lot of slippage. All of the glue in between this is just gonna cause these rings to shift around, and that's not my favorite. But while this is tacking up, I can move over here to my second plank and get that going. Now obviously the base isn't segmented, so I don't really need to stagger anything here. So this isn't as important, but you still want to get good contact with everything. And I'm actually gonna flip this over so I can visually see if there's glue coming out of these joints here. And if I'm not getting glue squeeze out here, I definitely need to add more. And I can feel that this is making good contact because it's already a little tough to move. Okay, it's been a few minutes and I can start putting my clamps on. And put my clamps on, I'm just gonna take my time and make sure that nothing is shifting around when I do this. I try to put the clamp right in the middle of the segment just to ensure that that's where the pressure is gonna be. And I work my way through. I go opposite ends first, and opposite and opposite. Then I just go around it real quick, make sure I've got good glue squeeze out all around, which we do. And then we just let these sit and cure again. And we're back. Let's get all these off and see if we need to do any sanding on the rings that are going to connect, and then we'll go from there. This one has some glue on this side, but not on this side. So I'm gonna use this side as the connecting side. And this one definitely has a lot of glue up here. So we're just gonna sand these real quick, and then we'll be ready to glue these together. All right, we got our two connecting sides sanded up, and now we can glue them together. This is where these F-style clamps come in handy, because obviously you can't fit these around that. So I'm gonna be using the F-style clamps, and the process is basically the same. Then put on my other one, apply a good amount of pressure, and make sure that we're good on every single side the best that I can. It is kind of important to wait for these ones to tack up, since you're going to be using these clamps. These clamps, if you don't put them on perfectly parallel, or you put them like this, we'll say, or like this, just a little bit, it will pull this top ring this way or that way. So let this sit and tack up for a decent amount of time. I would say 10 minutes. That will ensure that it's not really gonna move, and that you'll get a really nice, good round blink. All right, it's been about 15 minutes, so let's get these clamped up. I always put them down on the bottom and then slide my other piece like that. And I don't tighten it all the way. I just tighten it to where I feel that that the bowl isn't gonna come out of the clamp. And then I'll do the opposite over here. Tighten it down just to where it's holding on. And then another one. I basically want to get this to where it can hold itself up. And then once I get to a point where I feel like it's holding it pretty good, I'll start cranking down on them. And then I always just add more to most of the points, so that way I know that everything is getting pressure, equal pressure, and it should look pretty good. Okay, that will do it. We'll let this sit and cure, and I'll see you guys when it's done. All right guys, this is it, your first segmented bowl blank. I hope that it came out just as well for you as it did for me. I'm really excited to turn this. Unfortunately, this is where this video will end. Showing you guys how to turn this is a whole nother video on its own, and I want to give that to you guys. The next video we're gonna do is turning your segmented bowl blank. I'm gonna show you guys how to mount this to your lathe and some other techniques to help you get a good finish on your final bowl. I really hope that you guys got a lot of information out of this video. Let me know down in the comments if you think I missed something, or if you would like me to touch on something just a little bit more in another video. The world of segmenting is a super fun way of turning, but there are a lot of different techniques and different ways to do things. The point of this video was just to show you guys some of the basics and just to get you started in your turning. Anyways, I gotta get to turning this thing. Be good, be safe, be happy, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.